transit and public transit and light rail transit. We mentioned earlier, of course, that our listeners at CFPL London know that their city council has already decided what their future looks like, and it's going to be bus rapid transit, and they're working on that program right now. Hamilton's debate about light rail transit, the LRT system, has been going on for quite some time, a number of years now, and there was a pivotal vote yesterday at City Council to do with a memorandum of understanding, and as Hamilton, which by the way did pass by an 11-3 vote, and Hamilton Mayor Fred Eisenberger is quite pleased with that result.
A cleaner, more sustainable future with significant expanded and improved public transportation that will be reliable, equitable, and will provide jobs and opportunity and development for many years to come.
Yeah, it might be that way, but as John Best reports in the Bay Observer today, there's still a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross before this is finally completed, and maybe a few other issues that need to be dealt with, too. John Best, of course, is the publisher of the Bay Observer. He joins us on the Bill Kelly Show to talk about this. Morning, John. Thanks for the time today.
Good morning, Bill. My pleasure.
I want to talk about the implications in a second. But first of all, the vote, 11-3. There are a lot more than 3 people on council that have voiced their displeasure for this over the last number of months. Are you surprised that the vote was not as close as some people had anticipated?
Not really, Bill, because Councillor Collins is campaigning for the current election, and he indicated that he wasn't going to participate in debates. During the campaign, so that took one vote out. Brad Clark at the last meeting had indicated that he was no longer going to oppose it. So that left Tom Jackson, who basically his point was he can you got to face reality. Plus, he felt that the fact that there were 6 people opposed to it, it possibly resulted in the MOU having some clauses and some stuff in it that might not have been there otherwise. I'm not sure that's the case, but that's what his takeaway was. So I was not surprised at all, frankly.
Some are characterizing this as the last hurdle. I think actually the characterization that Mayor Eisenberger used on our program a week or so ago, John, was this is the last exit ramp on this process. According to what you're writing in the Bay Observer today, that's not necessarily true.
Well, I think all I was saying was, as he said, there are no off-ramps, and yet there's still 13 items that it was made very clear yesterday when they were questioning Jason Thorne. He said the only thing that you're approving today beyond the MOU, you're giving us permission to set up an LRT office, which is similar to what they had before. But the rest of the 12 or 13 items that are still to be negotiated, he said, are coming back to council. So the point I made simply in the article was, okay, so that's fine. There's no off-ramps, but what happens if one or two of these items come back and council doesn't like them? So it was really just an open question as to how done is a done deal. I mean, if you look at the definition, I'm not sure dictionary definitions mean anything, but an MOU is far from a firm commitment. But we'll see. I mean, the bottom line is council's voted for this thing now. The money's there, so I don't see, barring some major screw up, I suspect it is going to go ahead.
There probably will be, although we need to be clear when you talk about timelines, and I think that was discussed at the meeting yesterday as well, is they're probably not even going to look at this thing until after the municipal election into 2022, which probably means 2023, doesn't it?
Well, they were asking Phil Verster, and he was very cagey about...
Phil Verster, we should mention, from Metrolinx.
Yeah, he's the CEO of Metrolinx. He was at the meeting, or participated in the meeting, and he would not be pinned down on timelines either for the start of construction and certainly not for the end of construction, which I think that's prudent. I mean, with construction projects, if you look at the Ottawa LRT or you look at any of these projects, they hardly ever come in on time and seldom come in on budget, which is perhaps a discussion for another day, because if this thing for some reason comes in at over the $3.4 billion, the province is on the hook for any extra that has to be paid. But Yeah, I mean, first of all, they got those 13 items to negotiate. It's now September of 2021. So you could see, hopefully, I don't know how long it takes to negotiate. Some of them will be simpler than others. But we're sometime into 2022. And then the first piece of the work is going to be the utility relocation. Verster made reference to late 2022, so I would tend to, he's the construction guy, so I would listen to him.
Let's talk about the political aspect of this for just a second, if we could, John. As we all know, there's a federal election coming up in just a few days on September 20th. We already know that if the Liberals are reelected, well, this is their baby. This is it was their money that got this thing going. We understand the federal NDP are supportive of this as well. The wording, though, that Aaron O'Toole mentions in the Conservative platform is that the Conservatives would honor the commitment of that amount of money for public transit. They did not mention LRT at all. Is that an exit ramp that some people may embrace and try to grab onto if, in fact, he becomes the Prime Minister?
To be honest, I heard that, and I don't know what to make of that. First of all, the way the polls are shaking down now, and it could change. We got an English debate tonight, and then we got another 10 or 12 days or 10 days at least of campaigning. Even if he comes out with the most seats, O'Toole, although no poll has actually showed him, they've showed him very close, but I haven't seen a seat allocation yet that actually has him ahead. But it's so unlikely that either party now is going to form a majority. The most likely outcome is, frankly, another Liberal minority because they have Jagmeet Singh and the NDP as a partner, practically. It actually is kind of funny watching this campaign where Singh is really going after Trudeau for saying one thing and doing another, and yet he's been you might as well say, his left bower for the last 2 years, keeping him in power. So. The likely outcome, unless there's a sea change here, is that we're going to get a Liberal minority. And that being the case, then whatever O'Toole has said on the subject is probably moot.
There's a provincial election next spring. All three political parties seem to be on side with that, so that's not going to change the dynamic. But there also is going to be a municipal election, and I don't know who's going to run. I'm assuming I don't even know if there's going to be an anti-LRT candidate running for mayor. I mean, there has been in the last couple of elections. We're not even sure who's going to be there. I know that happened in Ottawa. I was talking to one of my media buddies the other day about that, and he says, well, they elected Larry O'Brien as the mayor, and that killed the LRT project for one term anyway, and then it came back again. So I guess anything's possible at this stage. But there's the other element of this that needs to be discussed here, and you brought it up in your article in the Bay Observer, John, is when the announcement was made about this collaboration with the federal, provincial, and of course the municipal government, and with this three-party thing going on, Minister McKenna made it quite clear that the federal money was contingent upon a massive influx of money for public housing and affordable housing. That didn't get discussed yesterday. It kind of got shoved off to the side and we'll talk about that down the road. To use the minister's own words, if that deal is not signed and that deal is not going forward and that's not part of this memorandum of understanding, where's the federal commitment? I mean, that's what they said was going to be the linchpin, and now they seem to have backed away from that.
Well, I think the more plausible answer to your question is that she was blowing a lot of hot air, frankly. It's not contingent. As soon as she made that comment, and she made it very clearly, and she talked about triple bottom line, and when we spend money, we have to have assurances, blah, blah, blah. So I went after her ministry to find out what the mechanism would be for that. They kind of kicked it back to the province, said, well, really the province and the city will decide, but we'll be very interested to see what they come up with. Well, you saw the MOU yesterday. It had 3 lines, something about we will endeavor to try to figure. So nothing there. It was kind of sad to see Councillor Nan. She was still trying to get Metrolinx and our local officials to explain to her how LRT would figure into this and how affordable housing would figure into the LRT proposition. And the real answer is it ain't happening. If there's going to be affordable housing built, It's going to happen totally outside the LRT process. There's nothing going on there's no contingency that compels them to build. That was just hot air, unfortunately, from a minister who's not around to be accountable for what she said.
Well,
and,
if it was, John, it's regrettable because we don't need to remind our listeners that there's a housing crisis in this country right now, and you know the concern here is that the way things are being structured these days is an awful lot of the pressure to come up with that kind of is on the municipal government, and they just simply don't have the money or the wherewithal to do that. So any assistance and drive from the federal government, especially, would be welcome here. And well, you know, they were talking the talk, but I don't see them walking the walk here.
Well, I mean, $3.7 billion, Bill. We could have spent $1 billion of it on a first-class BRT blast, the whole system. We'd have 2.7 left over for and affordable housing. The private sector can play a role in affordable housing, but what we really need in this city is public housing. We got a 5,000-unit backlog in public housing, and the only way public housing can be built in any great quantity is with public money. And so we've made some choices. Council's made some choices. The lower city councilors have made choices that they're gonna vote for something that's only going to exacerbate the affordable housing issue. There's developers standing by. I was talking to somebody today that said he had been talking to two developers and said they just can't wait to wipe out most of that, I'll call it crap, referring to downtown buildings. And get on with the building boom. So, you know, this affordable housing, housing insecurity, all of that, it's going to get worse. And those people who sort of shielded themselves with the words affordable housing in order to justify their vote, they really are going to have to answer for this.
Well, it's going to be a concern in a crisis, and you're right. I mean, I understand that the private sector has to be a part of that as well. But usually, what governments, successful governments, have done, and by the way, we're I think the only G7 nation that doesn't have a national housing strategy. But anyway, you have to incentivize. You've got to bring them to the table and say, okay, here's what's in it for you guys, instead of just your largesse and your commitment to community and all that sort of stuff. But you're right. I was under the impression, because we talked to the minister, of course, that the day the announcement was made, that, well, let's put this in the front burner, and that's going to be part of the discussion too, but apparently not. And I guess we'll have to go cap in hand again to the federal and provincial governments and start asking for assistance in this. But that's only been going on for the last, 25 years, John?
Yeah, and I mean, there is, there are some solutions, or at least some beginnings of solutions, and one of them is the city owns land all along those routes. The province may or may not own some property along those routes, and they have to be set aside for public housing. It can't all be thrown open to condo developers. If we're going to do anything about it, I mean, there is municipally owned property. One of the speakers yesterday from the Community Benefits Network, he said they need to pass some really specific zoning along the route that will ensure that some of this kind of housing can get built. But let's not confuse what they call affordable housing with where the significant need is, which is public housing. Affordable housing can be $1,500, $1,600 a month. That's not going to work for anybody that's on assistance. I mean, we need a real major uptick in public housing, and nobody's doing anything about it.
I got 30 seconds, but I've got to ask you this, and it may sound like semantics, but I think it's very important. There's, as you mentioned in the piece in the Bay Observer, there's still going to be a lot of negotiation about a number of items, but is the debate over? Well, the debate about whether to do it or not is probably over, but the debate about things like what we're talking about today, affordable housing, and also just the whole implementation, no, it's going to go on forever. It might be my grandchildren that are having these conversations with yours, but there's plenty to talk about right through to the end of this. John Best, publisher of the Bay Observer, always great to get your insight into this, John. Thanks so much.
My pleasure, Bill.
Take care. Let's do a quick break, and then we're back. This